Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Cover. Welcome to the Mediators Breakfast Club. I will shortly introduce our speaker for this morning, Andrew Miller, now KC, King's Counsel. And also just a reminder that this session is being recorded. The networking at the end will not be. And we'll introduce first timers at 10 of the 22 new. Oops, that's better. Sorry. Anyway, good morning, everybody. As I was just saying, we're just being recorded, and we'll do first timers at the end. I'd like to introduce Andrew Miller, now King's Counsel, and I was looking at doing a bit of research on Andrew. He's going to, as you will see, talk about halfway up the mediation mountain. He's a fellow member of IPOS Mediation, as I am, or I'm with him. And also he has great feedback and is a very busy mediator. And I think he's currently sitting in Dubai, as it happens. So, Andrew, would you like to take it away?
I would. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael, and everyone else on the team, Dave and Martin. It's really lovely to be with you, albeit virtually. As Michael said, I'm actually sitting in Dubai at the moment. I thought I'd give you a bit of the background view that I have, so you can enjoy that. I've got a few. I can keep changing them. So let me start by thank you for the introduction. I should say I'm in Dubai. My chambers comes out once a year, or did pre-COVID, and they talk about everything litigation and a lot about arbitration. And I've been coming, not every year, but the first time I came out was, in fact, it'll be 10 years ago in January. It was in 13. I will be speaking tomorrow as one of 8 speakers at this conference, and I'll be speaking on mediation, and it will probably not come as a surprise to many of you in front of me, many of the faces I know very well, that I will be the only speaker on mediation. And that really sort of sums up quite a bit, you know, where we are and what my view is in terms of halfway up the mediation mountain. So when this was first thought of in terms of a talk, or rather when I was first invited to talk, Michael put forward the title of my journey from barrister to mediator. I thought that would not be the most interesting and probably could be done quite quickly, but I think I am actually, in homage to Michael, I'm going to start with that a bit. A lot of you who know me may know it. I am a barrister by trade. I've been a barrister for, I've just gone past my 33rd anniversary. It goes without saying that I started in chambers at age 6. Can't possibly be any other thing. And for the best part of 25, 27 years, I think, of that, I was a regular barrister doing commercial litigation. I specialized in construction, property damage, insurance related. One side or the other. Where I was fortunate, where it was slightly different from, I think, many barristers of my generation, is that I got to see mediation very early on. I was instructed by American attorneys, and I saw my first mediation in 1994. And that was at a time, I have to say, when I probably couldn't spell the word mediation. And certainly the silk Queen's Counsel, as we were, who was a very traditional silk, wouldn't have known if they were talking about medication or meditation. But we had a very eccentric, I'd say, American in-house counsel who talked to us about this process we were going to go through, called mediation, and told us everything that was going to happen, and clearly had been on a mediation course and talked about the 5 stages of mediation, etc., etc. And when he had finally finished describing this process and left the room, the Silk, the Queen's Counsel, turned to me and said, "What a load of shite." And what was for me quite interesting was I didn't know if he was, I was very, very junior. What I then saw was actually a process that I knew nothing about. I'd had 3 years at university studying law. I'd been a year at bar school. I'd had a year of pupillage in chambers, and I think I was about 3 or 4 years called at the time. And it was a totally new process. And that sort of set me on this journey in the foothills, very much, or staying in the foothills of the mountain. And I used as much as I could, or as much as what I will refer to and come back to, the gatekeepers of mediation, being the solicitors, allowed me to use. I used mediation as much as I could with my clients. And so I got to see an awful lot of mediations when I was a barrister. And I would always have described myself as being a huge fan of mediation. I wasn't always a massive fan of all the mediators that mediated the disputes I was in. And I was always struck by the quite high level of dissatisfaction that clients often had in mediation. But I always had certain quite strong views, and on mediation, I had quite strong views, I think, throughout, but on mediation. And that led to me finally deciding to get accredited and to start dipping my toes in the mediation pond. And so I've been now mediating as mediator for the last 7 to 8 years. And I actually sat down with my clerks in chambers in 2017. And I said to them, right, here's my plan, is to keep doing what I've been doing essentially for the last 2 to 3 years, which is being a barrister, but being a mediator as well. And over the next 5 years, we will phase out the barrister work and we will concentrate on the mediation work only. That was greeted with some horror from my clerks, or certainly some dissatisfaction from them. And as it then turned out, was I ended up doing my last barrister work in 18. So I didn't give them the pleasure of 5 years of me. I jumped ship completely. And the reason I did that was I saw very, very quickly that I was changing profession. And it sounds strange because I'm still in chambers. I'm still mediating the same type of cases that I did at the bar, but I was changing my profession. It didn't matter that I had years of experience and relationship with a lot of solicitors. It counted for something, but it didn't count for very much in terms of those solicitors. And it's a bit of a myth that the second, if you are a barrister or a solicitor, the second you move, the solicitors who used you will use you as a mediator. In fact, I found it was the opposite. They would make every excuse under the sun not to use me, and some quite rightly, because I'd known them for so many years, and I'd say there was a friendship as well as a professional relationship. And so what I found I had to do was start again. And so the reason I actually stopped being a barrister was because I could then concentrate on it, and I could actually do, which I think is the really important thing, is actually declare myself to be neutral. And for me, as I do a lot of work with, I always have with insurance companies, for insurance companies, against insurance companies, it was very important, if I was going to mediate those type of insurance, commercial mediation, that I could actually genuinely say I was a neutral. And I was actually told point blank by some solicitors and indeed some insurers, you're either one thing or the other, and make a decision, and we will instruct you accordingly, but don't be both. So what did so that was my starting to really, having been in the foothills as a spectator of the mountain. That was my introduction and starting to climb it. And what I saw, if I'm going to keep these metaphors and analogies going as long as I can, certainly for the best part of this hour, is, to my surprise, was how different the view was. And people often think that I'm joking about it, but when I say some of the things, but one of the things I saw very quickly, and it did come as a surprise that I kept very much to myself during the mediations, was how both rooms were working in terms of their belief in the case, their enthusiasm, their confidence that they were right. And you may be sitting there thinking, well, isn't that obvious? But as a barrister, and most barristers have far more confidence perhaps than they should. If I was doing a case, or rather when I was doing a case, and I advised my clients, well, that advice had to have been right. And so barristers on the other side, solicitors on the other side, they had to sort of be pretending that they were right, because if I'm right and they were clever, or much cleverer than me, they couldn't seriously be arguing. They were arguing it, of course, but they knew that they must have known that I was right. And I think that came as the real shock to me, seeing both rooms, and it still is. The last mediation I did was the end of last week. It never changes. Every single mediation, seeing the absolute conviction and belief in each room, and realizing that each room was the same as me throughout my practice, that they themselves didn't believe that the other side had that conviction. Because those of you who are on and who mediate will know that when you say something, when you're doing some reality checking in a room, it's not unusual for someone in the room to say, yes, but I don't think they really believe in their case. And so now what I try and take in, it's quite difficult to say, actually, they really do believe in their case. And I'd say their conviction is as strong, if not stronger, than you. What I also saw, what the view that I found to be so fascinating, which although I was a great user, as in a mediation advocate and someone who encouraged mediation, what I had not really given a lot of thought to until I started mediating, if any thought actually, until I started mediating, was where mediation actually fitted in to the whole litigation matrix. And it's not taught. I did the CEDA accreditation. And I have a lot to say about accreditations at the moment. I actually teach the RICS evaluative mediator accreditation. But the actual, it's almost like, what's the jurisprudence of mediation? What sits behind it? And those of you who follow me on LinkedIn or have seen, I've had a title to a talk that I've given over the last 5 years, both in the UK and actually outside the UK as well. And it is called The Relationship Between Mediation and Litigation, and Mediators and Litigators. And sometimes I add a line to it, or I put good friends or just casual acquaintances. And I think it's quite fascinating what the relationship is between mediation, litigation, and mediation and arbitration, but other dispute resolution. Because there is this relationship without any doubt, and there are key players in this relationship. And where I think it's certainly helped me in my mediation career, is looking to see how is this working. Mediation doesn't just happen. Yeah, how has it come into play? How has it evolved? Who's been driving it? And one of the things when I give the talk is, and I've already mentioned, I talk about the lawyers, and I'm principally talking about solicitors in the UK as being the gatekeepers of mediation. And so understanding what it is, what their worldview is or has been in terms of mediation that has governed the actual mediation you're in, but mediations as a whole coming to a fore. And I think that every good mediator also thinks about this, thinks behind the actual dispute itself. What has actually led to this dispute coming into mediation? Why has it come so early? Why has it come so late, etc.? Who are the key players, and what's going on? And one of what in that talk, one of the slides I have is a slide which actually poses a question, and it was a question that was put. I was lucky enough to give a talk in Singapore 4 years ago. And when I gave the talk, it wasn't that title. I think it was 5 years ago, and that's what led to the talk. It had a different title, doesn't matter what it was, but I had these bits in it, and I was asked by the person who runs the Singapore Mediation Center, would I change the title of the talk to Are Lawyers the Enemy of Mediation? And I said I wouldn't, because I'd invited quite a few lawyers I'd worked with, and I thought it was a bit antagonistic, but I put it in a slide. And again, that made me think about. And so what I did was I put positives and negatives in terms of lawyers being involved in litigation, be involved in mediation, and that's they have obligations to their client, but the negatives were quite large, and it dealt with how they actually feel about mediation, including how they feel it's going to affect their own practice, their own fee collection, how they deal with time of it, how they address the issue of mediation in terms of telling their clients or not telling their clients about it, when they tell their clients, etc. And how not just solicitors, I'm picking on solicitors, but barristers, but how they actually advance the mediation. And if they advance it in the same adversarial style to which they're used to. And it's not a criticism of them, because it's an understanding that the parties in front of you struggle, whether they know it or not, most of them, to move from their normal adversarial or determinative style, which is they're doing everything for someone else to determine the outcome, and move into what we all know as being a settlement, a resolution style. So that's been something that's been a feature of my growth as a mediator, is sort of getting under the skin. I've actually never used the phrase before today, the jurisprudence of mediation. That probably makes it quite grand, but it's, I think it is that. And I think it's key to being a good mediator, because it means you're looking at other things in the room other than the dispute. You're looking at the relationships. You're trying to find out what is it that's brought the parties here, and that's often a key to unlock certain doors in the mediation. The same thing converse, what stopped them coming here? And the other key to it, really dealing with that relationship, because it does still come down to the lawyers itself. Where do the clients fit into this? And one of the slides I have, I'm now going to wish I had slides for this, but one of them, and it works far better in person than on the screen, is I put a list of different things, and at the bottom I put the word client, and I ask people in the audience, what's wrong with that? And very few ever get it. And what I'm actually looking for is that client has been put at the bottom and it should be at the top. And so just thinking about where the client fits in. And the best example I can give about this is it's surprise. I seem to be full of surprises today. It still surprised me. My mediations, I mediate across the whole spectrum. You know, some are low value, some are in, you know, very, very, very high value. So if I think about the high value commercial, sometimes household names there sitting in front of me, and I start my mediation spiel to them, you know, all the stuff about confidentiality. But what I like to do is talk about what mediation is to the parties, particularly the clients. You know. I'm always surprised, because I think if I've got a CEO of a big company or a CFO or whatever sitting in front of me, I'm surprised that they don't stop me and say, Andrew, this is really boring. We know this. We know this backwards, forwards. You don't have to explain it to us. But that is very rare, if ever that happens. And I sit there going through sometimes really basic stuff with really, let's say, high-powered executives and wondering, why have you not been told this already? You're in a piece of litigation that may have been going 1, 2, 5 years, sometimes more. Why has no one sat down and actually told you all this at an earlier stage before the mediator, either on the day of the mediation or, you know, X number of days before the mediation? And that's all linked to this relationship that goes on, and the power of the gatekeepers, etc. And I had a mediation fairly recently where it was a real example of this. Straightforward. It was a construction dispute, unpaid debts, big multinational corporation who was being sued, and we got a settlement. There was one person who was in the room the whole time, and he was the CFO of this company. It was actually one of the telecoms. I'm not going to say the name; you'll know it. Some of you have got it on your phone, and it was to do with the laying of the 5G cables of etc. and the towers. I was going to say something controversial. I'll say nothing to do with COVID, but I'll skip over that. But they were laying these. We did the mediation just to give you the sort of figures. It was about a just short of £1 million was the dispute, and I think the settlement, including costs, was around 600,000. It was something like that. And we were at the settlement stage, and I was just going from room to room, and I was sitting in the room with the parties, and suddenly this person who hadn't taken any role looked up and turned to the in-house counsel of this big telecom thing and said, "You may have seen that I've been on my computer most of today doing this, and I haven't taken part." And he said, "What I've done is I've put together an Excel. We've been working now on this project for the last 3 to 4 years. We've been using 70 contractors throughout the UK. We have spent 5.6 million on legal fees on this." And he said, in this case, the debt was 900 and something thousand. We've just settled for 600 and something, including costs. We probably did owe them the 900,000. So we've settled 300,000, and our costs are only 50,000. And he looked him right in the eyes and he said, "Why have you never said the word mediation to me before?" And the in-house counsel just sat there, not knowing why never said the word mediation before. And for me, it was the real, it sort of was the real example of where we are in terms of what's, of where we are and the view I see of mediation, which is that we still have a long way to go. That I'm not sure I am halfway up the mountain. We may have had the easy part. There's a long way to go in terms of the climb that we still have. So let me see how I'm doing for time. So what I want to really talk about is, having set that scene as to where I am as a mediator and what I'm looking at, is really the two things on this climb. And one is sort of looking back and one is looking forward. I might mix them in a bit. But the first is sort of looking at what it's been like mediating over the last 5 years. And more importantly, I think what it's been like mediating over the last 2.5, 3 years throughout the pandemic. And I should stress, because we're not, we don't all do the same thing. I only do commercial mediation. So my viewpoint is that of a commercial mediator. It's also a very personal viewpoint. I should have given this caveat right at the beginning, but it's a very personal viewpoint from where I'm from where I'm sitting, and they are my own views. So please, when we have at the end, if we have some networking, feel free to disagree with anything I say, and I'd more than happily welcome it. So let me really, what I'm interested in, because we are all mediators here. This is the mediation, or I wonder how long it's going to be called, the new mediation breakfast club, because it's certainly been new for a long time, and I'm not sure what the old one was. But how are we looking at it as the mediation fraternity? And I think I said 5 years, but I think COVID was a huge change for us, as in terms of mediation. And it's really what's led to, which is going to be the second point, which I want to sort of touch on a bit, not as much because we've had speakers on it, which is the new compulsory mediation, or potential compulsory mediation. So let me talk about what I see the last 2.5, 3 years. And I think what's important is to see that we moved remotely as a temporary solution to a temporary problem. And I know I gave a talk very early on in something like April 2020. And I remember talking about how we're going to have to just do this for a couple of months, and this is how we'll get through it. I, like everyone, didn't have any comprehension of what it was going to be. So we weren't selling remote mediation as being, this is the new way. It was going to be a temporary solution. And then as it was quite clear that the pandemic was going on, for me, what I saw was that we then changed, and we needed to start selling it as a more permanent solution. And that's what we did as mediators. And people talking about how it's it's absolutely amazing. It solves all the X, Y, and Z problems that you have in person. It's better than in-person mediation, etc. And we started selling it as a sort of solution, not simply to the pandemic, but indeed to the problems of litigation, of the backlog of litigation, and arbitration to a certain extent. And that clearly was, whatever you do is the right thing to do at the right time. But I sort of have a question mark in terms of whether we missed anything along the way as the mediation fraternity, or we failed to do something. And I think we might have done. And that's what I'd be saying, my own very personal views. But we went forward and we told everyone all the key things. It's flexible, it's easy to arrange, it's faster, it's quicker to set up, it's economical, it's less expensive, it's accessible. Anyone can attend overseas, wherever they are, for their own homes. It's efficient settlement. The amount of people I've seen, it's so much better when you can have a cup of tea in your own house. That seems to be the favorite line that comes up on many of the things. And what we saw, I think overall, certainly what I saw was, I live pretty close to Hampstead Heath. So the beginning of 2020, those that were in the diary, I think I had 5, 3 stayed, 2 went. So I did 3 remotely, and then I had no bookings for 3 months. So it was sort of dropped off a cliff face. I got to know, my reference to Hampstead was, I got to know Hampstead Heath really, really well, and really enjoyed it. But then it took off, and I, from about June, July 2020, there was a real increase in mediation, and of course all of it remotely, as that was the only way to mediate. And what I personally saw was a greater take-up in mediation overall, and certainly in certain areas. So I did as a barrister, a lot of international arbitration work. and most of my mediation in terms of the construction side I saw was international, rather than, it could have been happening in the UK, but rather than the domestic construction, which chose to go to adjudication and rarely seemed to use mediation. And what I saw during COVID was a sudden huge increase in the construction industry using mediation. And so that all took place. There was a huge increase in the number of schools that for accreditation that popped up as well. Huge increase in mediation competitions for universities. All of these absolutely, the competitions, international competitions, domestic competitions, all fantastic things. So what I think we did a few things. We started actually, and I saw this in talks. I'm sure it happened in the New Mediators Breakfast Club, but I saw it everywhere. We as mediators started to say real positives, that mediation is growing fast. It's becoming the #1 choice of ADR. It's now been, it was said before, Boss himself said it, but he's been said no longer ADR, it's now just DR. Litigators have no choice but to choose mediation. It's the best form of mediation. Sorry, it's the best form of dispute resolution, etc. And there started to also be this huge push that of having become a mediator. It's an essential qualification, etc., etc., and lots of promises in respect of that. But I think there were three things, and I think we missed something, potentially got something wrong as the mediation fraternity, and there are things we failed to see and failed to do. I give another caveat. This is very much my own view. And if I pose the question, what did we miss? I think what we really missed from the beginning was that necessity is the mother of all invention. And there was a complete lack of choice at the time. And it wasn't simply that there was no other choice but to mediate remotely, and we know that, but there was almost at times no other choice. And so I had solicitors who, I remember one in particular, who I know as someone who I've known for years does not like mediations. And we had a mediation, and I was talking to at some stage and casually said, what are you doing here at this mediation? You don't like mediation? He said, I hate mediation. Still hate it, takes all my fees away, etc. I said, so why are you here? And he said, because clients are phoning us up and they're asking us what's going on with the court timetable, when are we going to have hearings, etc. And we are having to say we have no idea. And they're saying, well, you have to do something. I can't have this dispute carry on. What are you going to do? And we're having to tell them about this thing called mediation. And think about those words. I'm repeating them verbatim. We're having to tell them about this thing called mediation. And of course, this was partly in jest, but there was a huge amount of truth to it. He is one of a fantastic solicitor, but he's one of the people who isn't enamored by mediation, doesn't talk to his clients about mediation from an early start. But necessity is the mother of invention. He was having, at that stage, to tell them about mediation. And what was causing it was not because we as the mediation fraternity had found this fantastic new thing, remote mediation. What was causing it is what always caused things. Throughout my career, when things changed, it wasn't because the lawyers changed them. It was because the clients wanted change. So I mentioned I've always done a lot of insurance work. There was a huge change in the way insurers operated about 20 years ago, probably more than 20 years ago now. And we all had to change our working way, whether we were barristers or solicitors, because they were the clients and they demanded the change. The change didn't come from us. What the change was designed to do was to, at that time, nothing to do with mediation, was to save money, make things make things faster, etc. But it was completely client driven. It was not driven, and that was the same here. What we missed is that the clients were putting pressure on the solicitors, on barristers, whoever, to do something to get their case moving forward. And that, in my view, is why we started seeing such an increase in mediation itself. So what do I think in terms of, we got a lot right? Now, I'll say immediately, we got an awful lot right. But there were things I think we got wrong. We talked an awful lot as a fraternity about the benefits of mediation, and that's great. We were putting it forward a lot more. But given everything I've said, we didn't stop to analyze what was happening and why it was happening. We didn't look back and see what was happening. We were just looking a bit forward. And we kept talking about the benefits. And I think we convinced ourselves as mediators that we were advancing more in terms of the usage within the dispute resolution process than we possibly were. It gave us, it was a sort of a false illusion that we had. Yeah. And I think the hardest thing, and it still is, and I'm going to talk about the compulsory mediation. I talk about this a lot. I mainly am a mediator, but I also sit as an arbitrator, and I'm a trustee of Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. So I talk about this a lot there, mediation an awful lot there as well. But I use this phrase, and I think it applies to the mediation fraternity as it does to many, is we've been talking into an echo chamber for the last 2.5 years. And as part of this, I've said this phrase many times, so I decided I'm going to look up and see exactly if I've got the phrase right. And so I'm going to read. I looked up what is an echo chamber, and the best thing that Google could show me was an environment in which a person encounters only beliefs or opinions that coincide with their own, so that their existing views are reinforced and alternative ideas are not considered. And what does that mean to me, what we've been doing? And I think what it is, it's been mediators talking to mediators about mediation, talking to mediators about mediations, and talking to mediators about more mediations and mediating. And what we've failed to see, if I come on to the third one, what have we perhaps failed to see, is that first point is that the change happened because of necessity and was being led by clients. The second is we've been talking so much about this as a fraternity, but it's been very much that we've been talking in this echo chambers. But if I change the failed from failed to see to failed to do, what I think we really failed to do is miss an opportunity that was given to us and is still being given to us. So it's not that we've lost it, but it's the opportunity to talk and win over the users of mediation, the clients. And it's really difficult because how do you get out and talk to them? But we've been presented with this opportunity of in commercial mediation, and again, that's my worldview on mediation. We've been presented with this opportunity of having this wider access to more clients, to more types of clients, more people seeing mediation. And I think to an extent, we've failed to use the opportunity to see what we as mediators could do to keep this momentum going that was started as a result of the pandemic and as a result of the necessity. And so it really begs the question as to, you know, all these talks, have we been talking to the right people or not? Have we been talking about the wrong things to the right people, or to the right people, the right things to the wrong people, etc. And so ultimately it comes down to, it's a question. You know, I think there have been some failures, but it's really more of a question, you know, whether we have used this opportunity that has presented itself to us and still presents itself to us to get a greater number of users of mediation. I told that story about the CFO of a major telecom. You know, why didn't he know about mediation until he sat in one? He was the person who signed the checks, or I don't think we have checkbooks anymore, but transferred the money day in, day out to lawyers on all the disputes they were having. Why was it that the message had not got that to him? And we have to look at ourselves as mediators and ask ourselves the question, why have we not got that message out there? And what are we doing as a fraternity to get that out there? Yeah. And then it comes back, because I started this word, I've probably used it 2 or 3 times, about what I see as the gatekeepers of mediation. And I suppose I always say in my mediation, well, I don't necessarily say it, but I know it. I have to have a lot of respect for the team. I consider myself to be the new boy on the block when I come into a mediation. Yeah. So this isn't me being negative about mediators, about solicitors, but they're still very much the gatekeepers. And what I personally have seen, now we've gone back, now that the pandemic is behind us, I'm seeing the old habits creeping back in. During the pandemic, during all the remotes, I was seeing many more mediations happening sooner rather than later, or sooner than they possibly would have done. I'm starting to just go back to an old pattern of mediations happening further down the litigation road. Not always, but there's still some pre-mediation ones. But we're slipping back into old ways. Hence what I say about, you know, perhaps we missed an opportunity. And so that brings me on to the second point, which is the second point I want to talk about is what's ahead on this mediation mountain. And the big thing now is mandatory mediation. Every talk is on mandatory mediation. Stepping back a bit and enjoying the view from the mountain, again, the audience is largely mediators. We're still in this echo chamber, and we need to get it out now. This talk is not about the pros and cons of mandatory mediation. That's been discussed here, and you'll all have your own views. But what I'm very conscious of is that if I'm right, and I'm not being too rude about describing this echo chamber, I'm not seeing, when I go to these talks, when I watch them, etc., I'm not seeing the users of mediation there. I'm still seeing predominantly mediators. And if we were to step out into wherever you are in the world, step out into the streets and ask someone, what do you think, let's say you're in the UK, do you think the government should be making mediation mandatory? Probably most people who ask will ask you, so they don't have a view on meditation or medication. So the people who can use it are the we're not getting the message out. So the people in the boardroom, do they know? In-house counsel, do they know? Contractors, developers, and type of mediations, I know. Insurance claims managers, do they know enough of it, etc. And let me just tell you, because as part of what I've been doing, as I said, I have been working in arbitration for 20 plus years, and having become a mediator, I decided that I was going to stand to be a trustee of the Charters of Arbitrators, and I stood on a mediation platform. I was actually told by the chair of trustees, who I knew, who encouraged me to stand, He said, don't stand on a mediation platform because you won't be elected. And I said, well, that's what I'm going to do because that's what I do mainly. And I got elected. So I'm not the lone voice on the Chartered Institute, because the most fantastic thing that's happened, I'm coming to the end of my first 4 years. There's an election coming up. If any of you are Chartered Institute members, I'm standing again for 4 years, so I'll do that little plug. You'll get your election ballots. But as you know, and as we've had on the Breakfast Club, Jane Gunn is president of the CIR. Is the first mediation president the CIR has had. And that is a huge, in the 4 years, that would not have happened 4 years ago. So there's been a huge change at the CIR in terms of pushing forward. It's not down to me, it's down to a few of us who've been pushing it forward. And of course it is, the clues in the word is in the word arbitration. One of the key things I've wanted to do is encourage more use of mediation and arbitration. And so we've started that. We've got a long way to go. We've got guidelines for arbitrators. But one of the things that we're involved in is the being part of the debate that's going on in terms of Parliament. And I don't mean literally in the Commons, but for those who don't know, believe it or not, and I've forgotten what the name of it is, there is a select committee or sub-select committee on ADR. And I've now given evidence to it twice. It's called the Alternative Dispute Resolution All-Party Parliamentary Group. It's an absolute grand title. When I was told I was going, I sort of made sure, I looked impeccable, because my idea of a select committee was these big rooms where you sit there in front of a U-shaped table of MPs and they can ask you absolutely anything. It was not that. When we walked into the room, it was a tiny little conference room with 5 MPs dotted at different parts, not being filmed, recorded in any shape or form, but it is at least an all-party parliamentary group discussing ADR. And they've sprung back into life because of what's going on with the judiciary putting forward this suggestion of firstly declaring that compulsory mandatory mediation was not a breach of the human rights, and now having put out their consultation papers as to do that. And it's a huge step. And why I'm sort of going to finish on sort of this topic is because it's hugely positive. Wherever you are on your views on mandatory mediation, for me, it is a huge positive that this conversation has widened, and that they're actually, whether it comes to anything, we'll see, and that it's going to take a bit of time, but there actually are parliamentarians, MPs, the legislature, as well as the judiciary, talking about mediation. Forget the mandatory bit, they're actually talking about mediation. And those who are involved, and it actually involves not just MPs, but Lords, but those who sit in the House of Lords as well, take part in this. There's two things. Some of them know a lot about mediation, but I'd say most don't. So it's quite a learning curve for them. What I'm feeling, and I'm going to stress again, and I'm sorry for repeating because it's very much a personal view, I think we've got a bit of a clash going on, because in terms of the judiciary have put forward what they think should happen, the Ministry of Justice has picked this up and is running with it. And in the end, there's going to have to be some sort of legislation. And what the questions that have been coming over the last 2 sessions, I'm sensing is, how keen are they, the MPs themselves, those who are involved, how keen are they to take the subject and actually go forth, introduce it to a much wider audience of the rest of the MPs and indeed the Lords, because we have to go both houses. And I don't know the answer to it, but I know there's going to be huge question marks. There's huge question marks over, will it cost anything, etc., how it will happen. etc. But what they're interested in, and the one thing I'm wondering, what they're really interested, and some of the questions that come up from the MPs is how it's working. How does a mediation actually work in practice? Most of them have never seen a mediation. And that for me was pretty interesting, to actually, that they want to know how it works. And one actually asked a question to do with, very similar to the bits I was talking about, the relationship. Do all lawyers feel the same about mediation? Are solicitors keen to go to mediation? Doesn't it cut their fees, etc.? So they're thinking, for me, the positives are they're thinking on these lines. The bit I have that I'm slightly personally concerned about. If you ask me, I am pro having mandatory mediation. It's not the cliche. It's not mandatory settlement. It's just making people get to the table and talk about their dispute. The one thing that I see is going slightly backwards for me is if you haven't, look at the government's consultation paper. It's easy to find. Just put government compulsory mediation and it will come up. But there's a forward by Lord Bellamy, KC, and he says two things in it that I'm sort of concerned about. And when we had, forgive me, I'm forgetting, Lady Justice Aspin, someone will correct me if I'm wrong on it. She used the phrase as well, so it's the phrase they've been briefed to say. And he says, I've got it in front of me, I'm going to read from it. It says, in his forward, I also want to begin laying the groundwork for embedding mediation as an integral step in the court process more widely across the civil justice system. And he also finishes by saying he praises what the UK has done, so we must continue to forge the way forwards by cementing mediation as an essential part of the modern justice system. Both of those are commendable. But for me, it's a slight step backwards, because my view was that mediation should really be an alternative dispute resolution process. And if you're just going to, if you're seeking to embed it within the litigation process, the court process, there's something for me that's a little bit wrong with that, because the thought will be, I can only mediate if I'm involved in litigation. And for many years, we've been talking about, you don't need to wait to litigation to start mediating. So I have a slight concern about the way it's going. The real aim of this is, and how they're going to make it work actually in terms of the numbers of people that they're going to use. And as I understand, their intention for these 1 hour mediations is it's going to essentially be civil servants. It's going to be their own team who are going to do it. How they're going to do it, I've no idea in terms, etc., how they're going to be trained, etc. But what is clear that's coming out from this parliamentary group, from the Ministry of Justice, is if this happens, it's the start. And I think that really is, so in other words, it will start with cases of 10,000 and they will keep increasing. Their big question mark, and this is why the parliamentarians, and this is what I go on, their big question mark is they know that this will cost money. You may be able to staff at the beginning, the under 10,000, you may, I don't know how they will, but you may with civil servants, but in the end, it's going to cost money, and how you're going to do it. And that's why they're having these meetings about it. But the idea, the vision is that it keeps it's growing. As I said, I've been a barrister 33 years. I've seen quite a few visions over the last 3 decades. Most of them have not come to fruition. So yeah, hopefully this will, but it's going to be a slow process. And what I can say is looking up. I can't see it yet. There's a lot of cloud cover at the top of that mountain. So I personally don't know if it's going to happen or not, but it's good. So let me just finish on the real, what I see the real positives. and I always think you should finish every talk on being positive, is from when I started mediating some 7-8 years ago, people are talking about it now more than ever the last 3 years. And I think that is absolutely huge positive. I asked a lot of negatives in terms of, are we reaching the right people, etc. There's a lot of work to be done, but we're clearly reaching more. And the knowledge has increased. It's nowhere near what it should be, but it has increased. And what I'm seeing, I think more than I did if I went back 3-4 years as a mediator, is the lawyers are better. So I've said some negative things, but I am actually seeing the legal teams are working better in terms of how they work in a mediation. And I put mediators into lawyers into 2 camps. If I'm asked for, especially about counsel, I'm asked, should I bring a barrister to the mediation? I just say, one, it's up to you because it's a monetary thing. But for me, do they fall in are they good mediators? Are they positive about mediation or negative? And what I'm seeing is a lot more people in the positive about mediation camp. Friendly towards mediation, I think, is the term I use. And finally, the fact that the judiciary is so on board with it is only a commendable thing. It's not just here, it's happening across the world. And the fact that now we've got government that are chipping in and taking part in this debate, I think it is absolutely positive. So for me, the view is very good. As I say, it's scattered cloud cover, etc. But still, incredibly good. The view and the temperature for me at the moment is that outside, which is quite, those who join, I'm actually sitting in Dubai at the moment. So thank you very much for listening in. I've gone probably longer than you wanted me to, David, Michael, Martin, but I'm going to stop talking now.
Well, that was fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. Great tour de force. How much longer have we got your attendance, do you think? At
least 20 minutes. I think I've got to leave here by past.
Okay, right. All right. Well, Martin, shall we open it up to everybody to ask questions? Who'd like to go first?
Michael, I've asked people to put their hand up, so Chris Makin is the first, I think.
Okay.
Morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Andrew. It's so refreshing to hear you. Sorry?
I said good morning, Chris.
Yeah, yes. Morning. It's so refreshing to hear you talk. I wanted to emphasise 2 things which you'd spoken about, which I've experienced as well. I do emphasise I'm not a full-time mediator by any extent. I'm a full-time forensic accountant, and when the mediations come in, I say, yes, thank you very much, I'll do it. I've had 3 invitations in the last 24 hours, which is exceptional, but very pleasing. Anyway, the 2 things I wanted to emphasise from what you've said were, firstly, the horrendous costs which build up even before the mediation. And so many people, so many businesses don't bring in the cost, the loss of management time and so on. With your telecoms example, it was very easy if they were paying 79 contractors, that could be worked out. But if it's, say, a small family business, the waste of time by the directors before they ever get to mediation, added to costs to date, can be quite staggering. And the second very brief point I wanted to emphasise is the few mediations of mine which fail tend to be because both sides, if it's a 2-party dispute, have a perfectly logical explanation for their stance on their interpretation of the evidence. If that can be brought into focus during the mediation, there may be a chance of reducing expectations and getting somewhere. But if a mediation fails, each side feels they were perfectly justified in everything they did because the evidence supported them. That can't be right because there's another party in the other room with the opposite interpretation of the same evidence. The challenge, as I said, is to bridge the difference on those different interpretations.
Yeah, Andrew, do you want to?
I'm trying. So the question, I think from that, and thank you very much for those points, and they're all absolutely valid. Costs are always an issue. Not always, more often than not, I would say. For me, in the disputes I have, costs are one of the major stumbling blocks to getting the settlement. I subscribed many years, I guess I still do indirectly, but I subscribed many years to the Lawyers Benevolent Fund. You know, it paid my mortgage, etc. But I'm staggered sometimes by the level of fees. I'm staggered by the fact that on many occasions, it's quite clear to me that a dispute could have been mediated, you know, a long time prior to when we are there sitting in that room and having, say, fees. So it's part of what I was saying. It's part of the education process of those who are really the users of mediation. We're just mediators. It's not the lawyers. It's the actual clients themselves realizing that they can actually save money. All they have to do is be told. When they know it, it's a no-brainer to them. Someone stood up at the London International Disputes Week and in-house counsel and said, or posed a question, I can't remember, but effectively it was, when will you solicitors and barristers understand that you are in the business of disputes, but we are in the business of making money. We do not want to be in dispute. And the sooner you understand that, the better. So what we come to you for is to get us out of dispute, not to keep us in dispute. And I think that's, you know, that's something that as soon as more people understand, then we will see lower costs. In terms of the second bit, Chris, I think a lot of it, I'm not sure really what the question is, because there's lots of questions from that. But as I said before, parties have conviction. For me, I personally don't make the mediation all about settlement. I see the mediation as being the way to get to settlement. I know that 3 out of 4 mediations settle, and that's quite impressive. I know that 1 in 2 cases are lost. So the stats are very much in my, are lost by one party or the other. The stats are very much in my favor, but it still leaves the case that probably 1 in 4 mediations do not settle. How people go away, I think, depends on them, but also on the mediator himself or herself as to what they do. But I see mediation very much 3 out of 4 will settle, but that 1 in 4 is still part of a process. And you've started this process, and that's really important. You as the mediator have, and the parties themselves have started a process that will actually change the way they're going to, hopefully change the way they view the litigation. So they may go away, Chris, using your words gung-ho, that they're right. But what the mediator needs to do is to leave them with something that causes them to think more about settlement rather than about being gung-ho and continuing to fight. I hope I've addressed the points.
Yes, and there are advantages even in a failed mediation. For instance, you've learned a lot about the other side, which may drive an intelligent Part 36 settlement.
Yeah.
Dave, do you want to bring the next one in?
Yes, Tim Hardy, I think you're next.
Hi, Tim. I think we lost Tim.
No, we have, yeah.
I think you're there, Tim, but you're muted.
I'm here. Sorry. Okay, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Andrew. Fascinating run around the track. Andrew, I picked up on one thing that you said that really chimes with what I'm finding. And you made reference to the power of the gatekeeper and how solicitors come into a mediation and they advocate the case just as they have been advocating it in the litigation. And I reflecting on my own practice as a lawyer in mediations, I can see now that I used my power and my leadership role too aggressively, actually.
Yeah,
I can
absolutely
see that now. I can see that now, but I only see that now when I see this as a problem with lawyers, advocates in front of me in a mediation, and they're advocating their case so aggressively. And I've taken actually to addressing this with the lawyers when I'm having private confidential briefings with the team before the mediation, and just bring it to their attention that they have incredible power and a terribly important leadership role, and being humble and admitting my own weaknesses, saying that, look, I know in retrospect I overplayed my hand in this on a number of occasions, and I think it set things back, and I just want to share that with you because it's important to know that you probably don't even think about your power. You're so used to using it for your client's advantage in the litigation. You think it's the thing to do in mediation, and frankly, it's not. You need to step off that and use your power positively for good of the settlement, not for the good of the litigation. Sorry. Okay, that's my point.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the phrase I use, and I think Tim, you and I probably talked about it. I mean, I often say I have to put a mirror up in front of myself and sit and look with horror to think of some of the mediations. I sat there as mediation advocate and said, we are right, they are wrong, we are good, they are bad, we have always been good, and they have always been bad. Yeah. And I probably resulted in quite a few mediations failing if I look back. So, but I didn't have the experience then.
Yeah, no. Well, I just think it's such an important thing. We need to,
and in fact,
to educate the lawyers better.
Yeah, in answer to one of the questions at the last all parliamentary hearing, I said a phrase. I can't remember what the question was, but I said, if I had been a mediator before a barrister, I would have been a better barrister.
Very good. Thank you.
Next one, Dave.
Yes, Amy, I think.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. That was amazing. I love the analogies. Fantastic. I just wanted to say that the idea of the echo chamber really resonated with me, because I feel like even if we look today, obviously every face on this Zoom call is convinced, we don't need any convincing. So we're spending, and it's nice, it's great, we're spending time together, but I think we all need to leave here with, a plan to convince a few more people about the proposition, and that's, getting to those clients. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm new here, but I'm starting on LinkedIn. That's the way I've decided to take it.
You're doing very well on LinkedIn, Amy. So.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, and I'm happy to help or give anyone the few tips that I know about on LinkedIn. But I think everyone here just make a pledge, choose something, anything, and go out and speak to people who aren't convinced, and try and, whether it's publishing articles, whether it's speaking on panels, whether it's, meeting for lunch with somebody, it's just getting it out there. And I don't really know how else to say it, but what would you say, Andrew? What should we be doing?
Well, I know, Amy, because I know you and I know you're Canadian. So, but I think the Americans would say pass it on.
Yeah, pay it forward, pass it on. Yeah.
And I think, I think that's a great thing to bring into this room. It is part, we actually have a gift. We have a huge gift to give to the world. God, that sounds so grand, doesn't it? But
that's brilliant. Yeah.
But we do have this gift, and I'm sure you heard, because Amy actually saw one of my mediations. And I often say to the clients, to the lawyers, going back to what Tim said, the best gift you can give your clients is the gift of settlement. Mm-hmm. And I think, but all we're giving is what people want. That's the thing. That in-house counsel stood up, said, we're here, our business is there to make money, not to be in dispute. So we're only telling them something that They want it should be the easiest sale in the world.
It feels to me like a responsibility, and it's on all of us. So we're all here, we all believe in it, but we need to don't just go back to your desk, like do something with that.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Amy. Stephen Bate, I think next.
Thanks very much, Dave. I mean, I would have thought that in the normal course in industry, in markets, you would expect a trade association to be spreading the word, but we don't. The Civil Mediation Council doesn't operate in quite that way, as I understand it. And at any event, that, as it were, joint marketing is not done, and one looks at the sort of slightly odd composition of the mediation market and wonders really whether the approach is to try and come together in some way to produce some joint voice to make the word, spread the word across the various business and other communities that are vital for the reasons that Andrew identified. And Andrew, thanks for your talk. It was, as ever, very thoughtful and well done.
Thanks. I'm not sure if you're nominating yourself to go forth and spread it in trade associations around the UK, but I think it's a really valid point. I think there's a lot of talk at the moment and a lot of different organizations, and I'm going to be careful what I say, sort of vying for this position of who's going to be the voice of mediation. And for me, it's irrelevant if you're not talking to the right people. And you've hit the nail on the head. It's not who's, I don't think there should be one voice for mediation personally, but it's actually seeing that, first of all, there's a few things to see. One, in the same way at the bar, I'm not a family barrister, I'm not a criminal barrister. I don't attempt to speak for them. We may be under an umbrella of the Bar Council, but we're very much individuals. I'm in the Commercial Bar Association, the Construction Bar Association. I'm not in the Family Bar Association or the criminal, because we're not the same. We don't practice. When I was a barrister, we don't practice in the same way. And understanding that not all mediators practice in the same way, I think is important. But understand that there is a need to go out there and talk, depending on which area of mediation you are, to the right people. You've hit the nail on the head. Trade organizations is a fantastic idea. Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen. I think there are 4 people still with their hands up, so hopefully we can get through everybody. Carl Islam, you're next, I think.
Yes, thank you, Dave. And thank you, Andrew, for your excellent talk. My question is directed at a structural issue, which is the structuring of either a Zoom or an in-face mediation using 2 steps by Zoom prior to the mediation. One, to break the ice with the solicitors and for the mediator to get a feel for whether or not they're friendly or unfriendly. And then thirdly, during that first Zoom mediation, just with each solicitor separately, to enable the mediator to have an understanding, to use your words, about what has brought the participants to the table and what has kept them away. So that would be step 1. That would be the first Zoom pre-mediation call. The second one, which conventionally would take place to test a link and to familiarize participants who are not familiar with mediation about the process and what happens on the day, and to make sure they're comfortable and just to introduce yourself, is also an opportunity to prepare the participants in the presence of their solicitors for getting in the zone to do a deal. And I say that because it's also an opportunity, if they lack the education we're hearing about today, to enable the penny to drop before the mediation so that daylight can be saved on the mediation by enabling them on their own initiative to follow up that second Zoom call with a discussion with their solicitor about how best commercially to prepare for the mediation day, i.e. by doing the mediation maths and preparing to do a deal instead of preparing to go to war. What are your views on that and your experience of that?
Well, Carl, that's a huge topic. I think in terms of what, as I said, it wasn't a discussion on benefits of remote or otherwise today. But in terms of the way I think most mediators are operating is actually having made use of, most of my mediations now in person, but I always have a Zoom beforehand with each side, and sometimes more than one with each side. So you have this incredible flexibility. You have the flexibility of hybrid meetings, etc. So all the things you've raised, are happening, and mediators are using them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So I think everything you're saying is not just doable, is actually happening out there and is taking place, because there's a huge amount of flexibility that takes place. So fear not, because it's all been taken care of. There isn't a single mediation I have. Most of mine are now back in person, but I still have some remote. There isn't a single one where I haven't met the parties online. Before pandemic, I always did by phone call. Now it's always by Zoom or by Teams, etc. So you get to see them.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Keith's iPad is next, I think, if there is such a person.
Yes, hello everybody. Keith Ely, actually. Sorry, but I couldn't organise the name in advance.
Are you sitting in, that looks very much, are you in the courts or Parliament? Which building?
I'm actually at the Royal Courts of Justice as we speak. I've got a group of people here who are all mediators, stroke observers with me. I am a trustee of the Society of Mediators, and Andrew talked about getting the word out there. Well, in 2019, before the pandemic, we worked with the Central London County Court to help reduce the backlog in small claims. We did 80 mediations, 50% got settled. We're back here again doing the same thing this year in the Blitz event from August through to September. And we are getting the word out there to members of the public, members of the judiciary, barristers, lawyers, all come into our little group here to talk about mediation. And we are involved in mediations as and when they come up on trial day, and go into a separate room, consultation room, that the courts have provided for us free of charge, and to invite people to mediate. And so far, we've not done as many as we did in 2019, but at the moment, our settlement rate in mediation is, in actual fact, 50% of the cases that we've seen.
That's really good to hear. Yeah.
Next one, Dave.
Thanks,
Can we keep our questions brief, chaps, and girls, because we are running out of Andrew's time. He's only got about 2 minutes left.
Yes, Hugh Elder, please.
Thank you, and hi there, Andrew. Thanks, that's a fantastic talk. I echo your comment about training lawyers in mediation early. I certainly would have made a better solicitor had I trained as a mediator earlier in my career than I did. Persuading lawyers that it's a good idea to mediate depends on overcoming the sort of the hump of lawyers being judged by their firms on billable hours as opposed to satisfied clients. I think the answer is really to say the objective of a lawyer is to have a satisfied client, and you don't get a satisfied client by dragging them through years of litigation, even if they win at vast expense. That's a message I think we need to try to get over.
I think that's spot on. I've always found the Americans seem to have a better attitude towards mediation. And an American attorney actually said this to me about 20 years ago. He said, "You Brits, see this as ADR being acute drop in revenue. We Americans see it as another tool in the box, another string to the bow." And we've used mediation, we've helped clients, etc., but we've still made money out of mediation. That was his point. So it's just having a different viewpoint on how it can be used. But it is having a realization that, which is very difficult for lawyers, very, very difficult, putting the mirror up to myself, for lawyers to realize that the most important person in the room is not the lawyer, it's the client. And actually the second point of that is actually understanding it's their case. It took me a lot of years to be able to say those words, to actually admit that it wasn't my case, it was their case.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hugh. Isabel. Isabel Phillips, please.
Thanks. Just a couple of thoughts, really. I mean, you're talking about Andrew and I know each other well, and I'm an absolute supporter of the idea of getting the word out. And just a couple of quick thoughts about that. I think probably most people are aware that there's literally thousands of mediators now in the UK who've trained as mediators. And Andrew, you talked very convincingly about the role of lawyer from within the role of lawyer. And I think one of the things that never ceases to amaze me with mediators is sometimes we talk endlessly from the perspective of mediator to people who are actually in the position of client or lawyer about why it's a great thing. And people, in order to understand that, often need to be spoken to from the position they are in. And yep. One of the things that amazes me as well is that how few mediators have actually used mediation, as in have been the client. Many lawyer mediators have maybe taken their clients through mediation as their lawyer, but how many of you have actually used it on your own disputes? And then the number of people that have to answer that in the negative in any area of life, whether it's community, personal, or commercial. Because I think one of the key things is not just about practicing what you preach, it's about being able to talk convincingly to people who are parties. You don't do that from the perspective of mediator, you do that from the perspective of somebody who's actually sat in mediation as a party and been through that process. So I think that's something that we too often miss. I don't know if you
yeah, no, that's absolutely spot on. That's a really interesting one. I know I was in litigation and I saw it from a very different point of view as from actually being a person who was involved in litigation to being that. So you have to find the dispute to mediate, but yeah, it would change how people think about things if they can. I'm not going to let you go. I think you should do a plug for not next week, the week after's CIR mediation symposium that Isabel is very keen in running. Go on the CIR, I'll do the plug, go on the CIR website. I'm talking at that as well, as indeed is Isabel. And Jane Gunn, who you all know very well, will be speaking. So that's happening over remind me the dates?
It's on the 4th and the 6th of October, and I'll paste, if that's okay, a link in the chat for people who want to go and have a look, and you can sign up online, or there's an in-person hub on the 4th in London, or in Singapore if you happen to be calling in from Singapore as well. So I'll pop a link to that, to the Chatterton Institute of Mediation Symposium. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Isabel. One last, Russell Shackleton, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm interested. Half of the inquiries I get from mediation have come from one party that wants to mediate, and the other party is not interested. And, say the prerequisite is that we need both parties to be at the table. Now, in some of these cases, they're not talking to each other. And I'm just wondering what your view is, Andrew, should, as a mediator, we be willing to actually go and talk to the party that doesn't want to mediate and just advocate the benefits of mediation to try and get things through, particularly with, the impact that's got on costs and time for them as a party? Or are we best just literally saying that we have to wait till we've got both parties that are happy to be in the room before we engage?
It's a nice idea, and maybe the idea I have in my head, maybe the organisations, whether it's CIR, CEDA, CMC, who are in this discussion at the moment, could set up, those of you who are old enough to remember the Sweeney, sort of a flying squad. So when you hear about a dispute, these people go out racing in, as it was in those days, the old Rover cars, and jump over the bonnet and tell people about mediation. I like it. I'm not sure. There's no monetary gain from that, so I'm not sure who's going to be volunteering to do that. And those who are young enough not to know what I'm talking about wonder what the hell is he talking about, the Sweeney. I think the shortcut is it. It happens quite often that I will be called by a solicitor with exactly that problem. we want to go to mediation, but the other side aren't keen. They don't want to go until witness statements, expert reports. And the only thing I can say to them, I won't say I'm going to phone them up. I'll say, give them my details, tell them you've spoken to me, and offer them the chance to give me a no obligation call. And I think that, that's part of the pass it on, process. And I'm doing it because I want them to appoint me as mediator, but I think that's how you do it. I don't think we can, go out there and guns blazing and tell people they have to, because in the end it does come down, as one of the people in the chats put, we still want to, even within a mandatory framework, maintain the voluntary notion of settlement. And the voluntary notion of settlement of mediation is that the point that has to be got across. Compulsory mediation is not compulsory settlement. So you still want to maintain that. Right, thank you very much. I'm afraid I am going to have to leave you. It was but it's been a huge huge pleasure taking part. So Dave, Michael, thank you very much for inviting me. Really appreciated it. Be great to see anyone who is coming to the CIR, whether online or CIR Mediation Symposium, see you online or in person. I actually, at the last one of these, I actually said, can we have the next one in person? And then I didn't, it turned out I was going to be out here in Dubai. But it would be so nice that there is, I am a huge supporter and advocate for us being in person as much as we can. We are social animals, and it's a total other talk, but I think there's a huge downside to living through, as I am now, through this green dot. We need to be there amongst each other.
Well, Andrew,
spreading germs again.
Andrew, thank you so much for sparing the time, and enjoy the rest of your trip in Dubai, and hope it's very successful. So we'll let you go. Actually, it's pretty warm where I am in the Isle of Wight now, but not anywhere near as warm as Dubai.
And I will leave you with my favorite view, actually, of Dubai, which is if you've been or you haven't been, that's called the Museum of the Future. I think it's 7 or 9 stories high. They call it the most beautiful building in the world, and it's stunning. That was last night. I should move out the way so you can see it. And it's a museum dedicated to life in 2075. And just to really sum up where we are in this day and age, I'm with a bunch of barristers from my chambers, and I was telling them, you must go there because I've been there. And one of them said, well, I won't be alive in 2075. What's the relevance of it to me? And I thought that summed up maybe part of what I've been talking about very well. Okay, well, absolutely well.
Okay, Andrew, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Dave, I'm going to have to drop off now. Do you mind just doing the first timers?
I'll do topping and tailing.